Let's talk in this video about reincarnation in Buddhism and how it ties together with science and quantum physics. So, Buddhism has embraced reincarnation as a concept since the very beginning. And Buddhism originated out of the Hindu religion in the 5th century BC. So these religions have been around for a long, long time. And they've all embraced this concept of reincarnation. So what does it mean? Reincarnation really means that you come back to life on earth several times, and that what you do in those lives affects future lives. So karma, the concept of karma comes in. So how you behave, what you learn, how you treat others in, say, the first life, then affects what you become in the next life. And the same thing happens again and again. So what is the purpose of this? And the purpose is really so that you learn, you become a better person each time you become incarnated into a life, whether it's a human or an animal. So you get more than one opportunity at life, you get more than one opportunity to learn, become a better person, and each time you become better and better, and then eventually you reach a state called nirvana, which is it's where you stop being reincarnated into life and end up in nirvana, which is a place of peace and happiness, and you have attained full enlightenment. So each time we are incarnated or reincarnated, we have the opportunity to learn, to balance up the karma from previous lives, and eventually we lose the desire for earthly things. So part of that growing up and learning is to get to the place where things that bother us on earth no longer bother us, whether that's wealth or power or influence or whatever these things that contribute to our suffering, those desires for things, we lose those desires, and therefore we lose the suffering. This is what Buddha was talking about all those thousands of years ago, is that eventually reach a place where those earthly desires are meaningless to us. Now, that doesn't mean you have to become an athlete. You don't have to give up all your possessions like people did in the past. Buddha tried that, and after a while he decided that wasn't the way to go, that it wasn't necessary to go that far. And so he ended up taking what we call the middle road, which is he didn't pursue riches. He'd been brought up in wealth and influence as a child. He didn't need that anymore. But he wasn't going to give up everything either. He was going to have a life of the middle path, just having enough to get by, having enough to have a good life, and also be able to help other people and to learn, become enlightened. So how does that fit in with physics? So let's look at quantum physics and some of the concepts that might influence our attitudes and beliefs towards reincarnation. So quantum physics is based on everything being energy. So everything that we see physically in front of us, everything that we touch, quantum physics says that all of these things are just energy until they are observed. So until you look at something or interact with something, it's all energy. It's all potential, electromagnetic energy, and it only becomes particles when we start looking at it or interacting with it. So when you look at something, it becomes real. When you touch something, it becomes real. Now, these concepts may be a bit hard to understand if you hadn't come up against quantum physics before and the laws of thermodynamics, which have been around for about 100 years now. But it's building on Einstein's work. So, you know, it talks about energy potentials, energy. So, if you have light, for example, light is a sort of energy. And it comes in waves. So you can look at light in two different ways. You can look at it as an energy wave within the visible spectrum that we can pick up, what we call visible light. So it's electromagnetic waves of different frequencies, and they make different colours. But it can also be packets of energy that we call photons. And so these are interpreted as particles. So on the one hand, when you're doing some experiments, you can look at light as waves of energy, and in other experiments, you can look at light as packets of particles, photons, that are a little discrete. So it's not continuous like a wave, it's a little package of energy, which we call a particle or a photon. And light behaves sometimes like energy and sometimes like particles. And so that's a really good example of how we can interpret things differently. So everything around us oscillates between being energy and particles, depending on what's happening in the universe. And we can also be interpreted to be the same. So we consist of energy. We consist of electromagnetic energy, which can be measured. So you can measure it in the brain with EEGs. You can measure the electromagnetic energy in your heart by doing an EKG or an ECG. I'm sure a lot of you have had that done at a clinic or a hospital, just to check the activity of your heart. And a lot of people talk about the electromagnetic energy that our bodies give off as an aura around us. So when you look at our bodies being energy and us being electromagnetic energy, we can change from being energy to particles and back again. And this may be a scientific quantum physics explanation of reincarnation. So we consist of energy in a sort of higher consciousness state. Some people call it a soul, some people call it a state of higher consciousness, but some sort of essence of a person is encapsulated in energy, electromagnetic energy. And when we come down to earth to have a life, or we're arrive on earth to have a life, we become particles as opposed to energy. So we're sort of condensed into a solid state, and the energy that make us up becomes particles, atoms, molecules, tissues, organs, bones, flesh. And so we become a person. And we live through our life, and then at the end of life, we become energy again. We transform into energy. And then at a later state, then we have the potential to come back again from our high energy state, our higher consciousness, or our soul can then enter a new body and become particle-like. So we can change again from an electromagnetic field or energy into a solid state, into particles. And so this process can be repeated indefinitely. But according to Buddhism, the purpose of this cycle of birth and death and rebirth is for us to learn to balance up our karma and become enlightened so that we reach nirvana. So here is where quantum physics and Buddhism intersect and support each other. So, what is nirvana? What does that consist of, or what does it feel like? Well, nobody knows. Nobody can say for sure. But it's meant to be a place of perfect peace and happiness, where there's the cessation of desire. So all of those earthly things we are not interested in anymore. We lose our desire for earthly things, and so it's the end of suffering. So we're at a very exciting point in science where we can now support some of these issues, because if you look at the number of Buddhists and Hindus in the world, all the religions that support the concept of reincarnation, it's millions and millions and billions of people. A huge number of people all around the earth do believe in this concept. So giving it some scientific backing is a real help. And being able to explain it in a scientific way is also very exciting. Now, there may be some of you who understand quantum physics already and quite happy with the concepts and can see how it would make sense that we come and go on Earth. Maybe other places than Earth, other planets, we just don't know. But it's very exciting to think that science has an explanation for this, how it could be possible. And that someday we may be able to understand it a lot better and have a lot more evidence. There is some evidence already. So, there are people there are children who maintain that they were somebody else in a previous life, and that they remember who they were in a previous life. Usually, it's small children, and that those memories go away by the time the child is 6 or 7. But there are people going around documenting all of these cases of children who maintain that they've been reincarnated and they were previously somebody else, and they have memories of being somebody else, and they also have knowledge of being someone else. So they may have experience in certain skills or languages or other ways of indicating that yes, they had a previous life on Earth. So we've got the science and we've got the beliefs, and we can put the two together quite nicely and come up with a real explanation of what's happening. If you don't understand quantum physics and you have no previous experience of it, then you might want to have a look at some websites to get simple explanations so that you can go back to this video and think about what we've been talking about and try and understand it a little bit better and understand the science. Because if it's a new concept for you, then it will be a little bit hard to understand. So the concept of, if you're driving down the road and you can see things in front of you and you're touching the steering wheel and there's obstructions that you can crash into with your car, definitely everything in front of you is solid. It's made up of particles, and that has implications for your driving. But what about the things behind you? What about the things that you're not looking at? Are they real, or have they changed into potential energy, into electromagnetic force? We don't know. But it's a really interesting concept to think that as you interact with things, they become physical and particles, and as you move away from those things, they then change back into electromagnetic energy. And that potential energy, that energy that changes into potential particles, has the potential to go in lots of different ways. And this is where the multiple universe concepts come into. So in each scenario, each particle can change into various forms. And so the universe we're in at the moment the particles have come together in a certain way, but there may also be a position where the particles have come together in a different way and created another universe. Now, if you read about quantum physics, people will say that a lot of those multiple universes have nothing in them. There's nothing there, no actual particles, and so they don't have the potential to be an alternate universe the way we understand it, the way we see it in movies, like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a great movie about multiple universes. But a lot of us have an understanding of the concept of multiple universes and how, like Schrodinger's cat, everything has this potential and we don't know which way the potential is going to go until we actually observe it. So by observing something, we're crystallizing it into particle form. So I'll try and source out some really simple websites that explain quantum physics for those of you who don't understand, and maybe put a link under this video so you can have a look. But I find the whole concept really exciting, really fun, and the fact that you could be reincarnated, that this life that we're living in at the moment is not the end, and there's a potential to have another life and have another crack at things. You know, we've all made lots of mistakes and we all have regrets in our life, but the idea that you can have another crack at it and maybe do better next time, get it right, is very comforting, especially if you're in the third stage of your life, if you're getting older and you're thinking about the end of your life. The fact that there may be another life, that you maybe have the opportunity to be reincarnated, is very, very comforting to people. And, you know, in other religions you have the concept of an afterlife or heaven and hell, but it's like a one-time thing. You get one life and one opportunity to either go to heaven or hell. With Buddhism and Hinduism, there's the opportunity to relive several lives, perhaps many lives, and have the opportunity to get with each life to do better, to learn more, to become wiser, to become enlightened, and to put away foolish things, as people say, to let go of the foolish things that we worry about. And that can also be very comforting in our present life as well. So in our everyday things, you know, there's the saying, everything will pass, and it does. The bad things will pass, and also the good things will pass. So those bad things that you're worried about or concerned about, they will eventually pass, one way or the other. And you will move on to other things. So that's very comforting, to be able to think that you can right some wrongs, that you can learn more and become wiser and become calmer and more accepting of things that happen that are outside your control. And so you become a happier person. And that's what it's all about, really, isn't it? It's becoming happy and content with life and not frustrated and miserable like so many people are. So in future videos we're going to talk more about this concept and how helpful it can be in your day-to-day life. So just introduce some concepts to you, and hopefully we will go into in more detail, and we'll back it up with more science and more explanations. And also I can answer some of your questions about it, and we can, you know, really delve a lot more deeply into it in future videos. And I hope that it helps you going forward, that if you suffer from anxiety or depression, that these concepts will help you. If you're sick, perhaps you have an illness, perhaps even something like cancer, which would affect your lifespan, and you're worried about death and what happens after death, that this will give you some comfort and some hope and also some enthusiasm to look more into these concepts and into the science as well, to give you some happiness and contentment.